really solidified in Hollywood as a big name, or as a popular name from the movie Schindler's List, which won a lot of awards. And basically, a lot of people think that they, know the whole story about Schindler from the movie, and though the movie does cover a lot of the work that he did, it doesn't cover all of it. And so basically, without giving too much away for the next segment, I want to say that Schindler, he was a Nazi, and he did hold a concentration camp. But it's not the type of camp that you would think. No, it was a labor camp, actually, excuse me. But it wasn't a bad camp, and I'll get more into that in the next segment. But he did have camps, yes, and he wasn't a part of the Nazi party, and he wasn't squeaky clean, no, but the work he did save millions, it saved thousands of lives at the time, and those people went on to have children, so in the end, he did save millions of lives.
And so this is a very, very important individual within the Nazi party itself.
Yes.
But at the same time, he objected in a real sense to some of the things that the Nazis were doing, and in a real sense, so you want to talk about that and some of the other things that might be related to this. And this is really a continuation of what we've done in reference to the rise and fall of Adolf Hitler. And at one time you gave us a review over the Second World War and European dictators. And I think that Hitler and Mussolini and Stalin were all a part of that. And so we anticipate what you have to say in reference to that. And when we come back, we'll get into a discussion in reference to that. But I think that basically you've given us what we are looking for. And we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. That's over. Got out of there too fast. Almost. Okay, yeah, almost. Half a minute, 30 seconds too fast. 15 seconds. 15 seconds. Is that what it was?
Quarter of a minute.
Quarter of a minute. Okay, Lana, this is the second segment, and so this is still the life and times of Oscar Schindler. And this is the second segment, and you've got 8 minutes, and it's up to you to carry this thing from now on.
It was up to me.
Well, it's up to you when you came up with the title, you see. And so this is your show, and this is your title, and so this is your information, and et cetera. But if you want to recall some of the things in reference to the visit to Washington, D.C. or whatever, and et cetera, and, anything that you think might be interested in reference to that. And see, this is also being recorded. You see this information here. Yeah, so we need this. We can put this, cut this out.
Bloopers. Bloopers.
Not necessarily bloopers. This is additional information that we put. People be curious in terms of how people do things and whatever, and et cetera. So,
yeah, we can make this into a separate video.
That's what I'm saying. And so we've got 8 minutes and 10 seconds. Okay, now see, okay, very good.
Let's take 10 seconds.
Thank you and welcome back to the second segment of the show for today. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's giving us some information in reference to the life and times of Oscar Schindler. And of course, Alana, let's pick up where we left off during the first segment, and to have you to continue dealing with this information in reference to Oscar Schindler and the part that he played in reference to the Second World War as well as to the Holocaust itself.
All right, so in the first segment, I introduced myself. I'm Alana McLaughlin. I talked about my background, education, and a couple programs that I'm involved in and things of the nature. And then I talked about what made me really want to talk about this, and I said, because I went to a camp called the Summer Program for Verbally and Mathematically Precocious Youth, and I took a class on Nazi Germany, and we watched Schindler's List, which is a really famous movie. A lot of people have seen it, you know, you've probably seen it. And after watching the movie, we went to the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C., and I learned more about Schindler, and when I got home, I started to read about him and read about all the great things that he did, and I realized, you know, a lot of this information a lot of people don't know, and so I decided to make that the topic of the show today. Now, Oskar Schindler was a Nazi. That's a lot of people, you know, debate on it. Some people say, no, he wasn't a Nazi. Some people say, yes, he was bad. He was a Nazi, but he wasn't your stereotypical Nazi. Now, me saying stereotypical Nazi meaning, you know, just attached to Hitler by the hip, you know, praise Hitler, hate the Jews, hate the Slavs and Gypsies, etc. He was not the stereotypical Nazi. What he did was he had labor camps. And that's another thing that a lot of people debate on. Some people say that he didn't, and some people say that he did. He did. What he would do is he would go to different camps, or like smaller camps, not, you know, Auschwitz and stuff like that. He would go to smaller camps. When they were in preparation to send people to Auschwitz and things, and camps like that, he would go and he would scout out the ones who weren't very physically able, you know, ones that would be sent to the oven or burned or, you know, shot even before they made it to Auschwitz and things like that. He would scout them out. And he would do either two things. He would pay some of the guards on spot to take them to his labor camp where he was going to put them to work, or he would make a list and send it to the camp and be like, you know, I want so-and-so, 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 so-and-so. And he didn't, no one knew, well, a couple of people did know, but for the majority, a lot of people didn't know that he wanted these people not to make them work, but to save them, because if these people would have stayed in their original camps, they would have been killed, because in the Holocaust, they killed children and the elderly, or the non-able-bodied. So basically, if you couldn't walk or missing both your arms, it was like a death sentence. I mean, either way, it was like a death sentence, but that was like a quicker death sentence. And so he scattered out these people, and he sent them to these camps where they were going to make bullets. And why I put that in the little quotation marks is because they didn't make bullets. He bought bullets from out of country, had them shipped in, and when his fellow Nazis would come and inspect the camp, he would arrange a plan with the people who were in his camp at the time, and he would say, okay, pretend like you're making a bullet, and then they would sell them to you know, whoever, and they would be used during the war. Well, they were supposed to be making these bullets. These bullets they weren't making, they were buying. And also, I think some of the bullets didn't work, but I'm not sure on that, but I do think that some of them did.
That was his cover in a real sense in terms of
that was his disguise. And the reason he was a part of the Nazi party was he wanted to also use that as a part of his disguise, because, you know, who would think that a Nazi was trying to help the Jewish people? And so doing that, he saved thousands and thousands of lives. And basically, when the war was over and done, they were killing off people who had concentration camps for, or they were charging them for, you know, crimes against humanity, and, you know, Stalin, all those people, and etc. They were killing off those people, or they were charging them with crimes against humanity, and most were killed, you know, hung, shot, etc. And so Schindler, thinking that they were going to charge him with crimes against humanity, fled the country. He fled, and he lived a very, very closed life. Well, at first, when the war was over, he had no money. That was a big part. So, his wife divorced him. I think it was after the war, and so it was basically on his own. At first, he would stay in houses in New York with relatives, and the people he saved would send, you know, fruit baskets and etc. And that's what he lived off of for a time, up until the fruit baskets and all that, you know, became very scarce. And so when he stopped, you know, living off of gifts and fruit baskets, he still lived with relatives. He had a very small life, and he came to New York and, you know, lived with the relatives up until his death. And now when Schindler died, something very, very beautiful happened when he died. And you see this in the last part of Schindler's List. All the people that he saved, the living ones at least, came and they put a rock or a stone on top of his grave. And so I don't know if they're there now. I doubt it. I mean, they could be. But if you go there or look up a picture, you'll see all these stones across his grave, and that's a stone for each life that he saved. And you also see in the end of the movie his wife and, you know, some of the children that he saved and things like that. And so you see all these little stones, and that's just like a real, that's what made me cry in the end, because I usually don't cry in movies, but that part really brought me to tears, because these people had such a great admiration for this man, because he saved their life, their mother's lives, their children's lives, and he made so many lives today possible by the goodness of his heart.
And so in a real sense, he turned out to be a hero as far as the Holocaust was concerned. And even though he might have been suspected by the Nazis army itself of running a labor camp that would eventually lead to the death of some of these inmates, what he was doing now was in a real, excuse me, saving them from death. And so for that reason, you believe that this is an important story. And as a matter of fact, I think the world believes that this is an important story, and that this is one of the heroes in a real sense of the Holocaust. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, I'm saying that Oskar Schindler made what nowadays is probably millions of lives, and what in the future will be billions of lives possible by saving only, at the time, was it 3,000 people? That went on to have so many more children, and I just think it's a beautiful thing, and that he was a great, great person. Okay, and so what we're going to do, we've got about 15 seconds before the end of this part of the program for the morning. And when we come back, we'll get into the last 10 minutes and give some speculations in reference to some of the things that you've already said in reference to that. And of course, we'll be back with our audience following this very, very short commercial break. Okay, you ready for this last 10 minutes? Yeah. Now, what are you going to do? How are you going to deal with this?
You said goodness gracious.
Oh.
Mine went to goodness gracious.
How am I going to do it? I'm going to just kind of recap for people just tuning in, like a little recap. And then talk about why I think Schindler was a great person and things like that, and, you know, my commentary.
Yeah, okay.
Like I usually do.
And you can do that for 10 minutes?
Yeah, I could do that for 20.
Well, just give me the best of your the first 10 minutes. Won't do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're doing all right. You're doing an excellent job.
Thanks.
Yeah, for the topic, because everything that you say about it is something that's new to me. I never saw the movie Schindler's List. I've heard of it.
You should watch it.
Yeah, I didn't know anything.
It was on the other day.
It was? Well, you should be able to give us some information in reference to what you saw the other day on it.
Oh, I didn't watch it because I've already seen it. But.
Well, you got 10 minutes now. And you're doing an excellent job so far. But it's always that last 10 minutes that determines the quality of a show. It's the last 10 minutes, and you keep on going in reference to that. Yeah, you're doing an excellent job.
30.
This is my most difficult show for the day here, but I guess it goes automatic. This is the most difficult show for me today.
Why?
Determine whether or not you can deal with this. If you can. Thank you, and welcome back to the final segment of the show for today. We're talking to Alana McLaughlin, and she's talking about the life and times of Oskar Schindler, and she's given us some excellent information. And Alana, let's see if we can pick up where we left off for this final segment to sort of wrap Schindler up in reference to some of the other individuals that you think play a significant role in reference to the Holocaust, as well as some of the things, for example, I think you've mentioned a lot about Anne Frank and some of the other individuals who were important in terms of the Holocaust. And so let's do it from that perspective.
All right, so if you're just tuning in the last segment that we just finished, I basically talked about who Oskar Schindler was. He was a Nazi, and he did save thousands of Jews by pulling them into his labor camp where they didn't really do labor. They made bullets, which were really bullets that Oskar bought with the money that he gained from various things. But basically, he bought these bullets, you know, sold them off thinking that they were Jewish made, but really they weren't. They were made somewhere out of country, I believe. But basically, when the war was over, you know, Schindler, he at first fled the country thinking that he was going to be charged and killed for crimes against humanity. But he wasn't. And so he then came to New York where he stayed with relatives. You know, a lot of people that he saved would send in fruit baskets, gifts, and foods, and that's what he lived off of, considering the fact that he was poor. And then when that started to kind of decrease, you know, he just kind of lived off of family members until his death. And then I mentioned something that not a lot of people know. If you've ever seen the movie Schindler's List, you know, in the end where you see a bunch of people in a line, and it's this long lines. You know, there's children, elderly people, you know, middle-aged, and stuff like that. And so in the beginning, you're probably thinking, you know, what are all these people in this line for? And they're dressed kind of 80s clothes, like around the time that Schindler's List came out. And so all these people are lined up, and then they all have stones in their hands. And so you're just like, what is happening? So they all go up and they paste a stone on this little marker. And then you realize that the marker is Schindler's tomb. And so they're all putting these stones on there, and there are just not thousands, but there are just so many stones, not just on it, but surrounding his grave. And these are all stones from the people that he saved. Because at the time he saved, what, 3,000 people? Think of those people, at least 100 of them had children. They had children, and they had children, and the line goes on and on. So just think of how many lives Schindler has saved. I mean, back then it was thousands, but just think now, it could probably be, if not already millions, near millions. And he just did so many great things for so many people, and you can't repay someone for saving your life. You know, you're in this thing called the life debt. And so basically they showed their gratitude by placing these stones on there. And I thought that was a beautiful part of Schindler's List that was very, very well persecuted. And that really brought me to tears, you know. I don't usually cry at movies, and that's why I was saying that it was so crazy for me to just sit there and just bawl my eyes out the whole movie.
And so in a real sense, Alana, I think we've talked about Anne Frank and Oskar Schindler and whatever. And so what you're saying is, in spite of all of the horrors of the Holocaust and the deprivation of the Jewish population and et cetera, there were efforts on the part of individuals like Anne Frank and Schindler to help alleviate some of the suffering. And it's important to recognize these individuals, because somehow we can get caught up in the horrors of the Holocaust and believe that all Nazis were in favor of killing all the Jews and et cetera. And here you've got an example. Now it's only one example, and certainly that might not have been common among all of the Nazis and et cetera. But nevertheless, this was an individual who's worthy of being remembered in terms of having that kind of information, that kind of memory. Is that what we're saying? Yes,
and I think that nowadays we focus, like in schools, we teach about Adolf Hitler and Stalin and the bad part of, you know, European dictators and things like that, but we don't focus on the fact that through all this horror, there were little rays of light, like Oskar Schindler, who showed us that looks are deceiving. Because if you just looked at Oskar Schindler, you would think that he was a trigger-happy, money-craving, drunky Nazi. And that's basically what he was, but he wasn't, you know, trigger-happy.
That was his persona.
That was his persona, and that was his costume, because strip away all the things that you would see when he was out, you know, having parties and etc. There was a man on the inside, and at the end of the war, when he was freeing all his, you know, people before he fled, he cried. And he broke down and cried, and then, you know, a bunch of people were coming up, they were hugging him, and then somebody asked, well, why are you crying? And he said, because I didn't save enough people. And, you know, I'm tearing up now just thinking about that, because this man, so many people thought so low of him, yet he broke down and cried in front of thousands of people because he didn't feel that he had saved enough people. Tell me this. I mean, there were probably other Nazis, but what other Nazi can you name that broke down at the end of the war and cried because he didn't save enough people? And I just think that it takes a lot of courage to be able to just do something like that. He just, you know, threw his disguise off and just, you know, basically said it out that I am upset because I feel as if I didn't do enough. And they were like, you saved so many people, and, you know, and it's okay. And it was, because I don't think at the time he was thinking that, just think about the bloodlines that you're saving. Their their ancestors, well, modern day people can always think back on their ancestors and just think, wow, you know, my ancestor was saved by Schindler. And so basically, that's another really gripping part of the movie that I cried at. And honestly, I just think that people, before judging, never judge a book by its cover, basically, because you don't know what's on the inside, and that's how Schindler basically got away with saving the